to today's Cloud Champion session. Today we're going to be talking about using GitHub and Azure AI Foundry services to build a website. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. The session is recorded today, and we have my wonderful colleague Marina on the call who's going to look after the technical side of that. The recording and the presentation will be available. The slides will be available a few days later. It's going to be a little bit different today. The slides, we're not going to be doing a sort of traditional presentation. It's going to be more demo led today. This is a slightly new format for me, so you might have to bear with me, but hopefully it's a bit more engaging and a bit more interactive. For that reason, normally I do the Q&A at the end, but what I'll ask you to do today is if you want to ask any questions throughout the Q&A, there might be some periods where I'm waiting for a response from Copilot, and during that time I'll have a look and check in the Q&A if there's any questions that need answering. So like I say, please feel free to ask throughout. If there's any left at the end, then we can address those at the back of the book. We've got lots of content to cover today, so let's get into it. Before we do, though, just a quick disclaimer, just to really set expectations, actually. The website that I'm talking about today, this modelmeters.com site, it's not an official Microsoft service. This is something that I put together over a weekend, and it was originally just for my own personal benefit. I'm using it today as a demonstration website, but please don't rely on it for production use, or please don't rely on it for your authoritative source of pricing information. If you do want to find the pricing of any of our services, we'll be talking about the Azure Retail Pricing API, the pricing calculator, or even the CSP price list that you can download within Partner Center or via Partner Center API. So also I'll be sharing the full code of this website via a GitHub repo. Again, it's not really for production purposes, it's really for just educational purposes. And so no support's going to be provided for the website itself, although I do welcome any contributions, pull requests, issues, if you want to open them. But again, no guarantee on how long it'll take to get around to those. Before we get going, my name is Guy Gregory. For those who don't know me, I'm a partner solution architect in our UK and I partner team, so GCPS. I've been at Microsoft for around about 8 years, and prior to that, I was working for Microsoft partners for about 15 years. So I kind of feel like I'm, with 20 years in the partner ecosystem, I feel relatively comfortable talking with our partners and understanding the needs of our partners. Been in the current role for around about a year, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's a QR code on the side there if you'd like to add me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to talk about today this Model Meters website and how I kind of built it using GitHub Copilot and some of the Azure services that we have, especially Azure AI Foundry services. So I'm going to sort of walk through probably about half a dozen key learnings from that process, because I'm not going to be able to sort of go from scratch and essentially build this in 45 minutes. So what I thought I'd do is focus in on, what are the top 4 or 5 things which, I really learnt during this experience and what would be useful to share with our partners. So I've kind of gone through this, and some of that is understanding how to use the price API. Some of it is using GitHub Copilot services, partly also how to deploy a website to Azure Static Web Apps. I think there's not, I'll be honest and say that I didn't really understand this fully before I did this. I'm not really a front-end developer, so deploying apps using CI/CD to Azure Static Web Apps, I didn't know before, but I wanted to share that back. We're going to talk about the GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot coding agent, also using the Azure AI Foundry services to automate AI agents within GitHub using GitHub Actions as well. And we're also going to have a little bit of MCP sprinkled in there. Then once we've kind of focused on and finished on that section, I've got a few useful resources, including, how to get started with Azure for partners, and making sure that you're aware of the communities that we have available for you to join. And then if we still have time at the end, we'll open it up to Q&A. And like I said before, it's not really a lot of slides here. What I've done is I've essentially I've got a few links that I will share, and these links here, they serve two purposes really. Number one, they serve to be a sort of documentation, so that if you want to be able to go to these later, you can. But also, it's just to keep me on track as well, to make sure that we're kind of focused on the right things. So let me just turn off my laser pointer here. So firstly, what is modelmeters.com? Well, you probably haven't heard of it because it's just a website that I set up. I had a need to basically be able to find Azure pricing information for the AI models that we were launching. So my focus is on Azure AI and Azure AI Foundry. So very often partners will come to me and say, well, how much is this new model that we've just released in the last week or so? And let's say, for example, they wanted to find out the pricing meters for Sora 2. I just essentially created this front end for me to be able to quickly look at pricing information, to be able to find out, let's say you want to look at Sweden Central. So there we go. Really quick, really easy pricing information with some really neat features on here as well. So I've got now the ability to export this as a CSV file, to share a URL with somebody. So that URL will take you to that page. To be able to look up very common models. So if I want to see the GPT-5 model family, for example, I can do that through just a couple of clicks. Or for example, maybe you want to look at the XAI Grok models, you can do that here. Also wanted it configurable as well, so I can hide columns that I'm not interested in. And some of this was actually inspired by pricing calculator. So I actually think this is a really great website. The only restrictions are that not every single model that we have in our model catalog is available here. So especially the newer models, they don't always come in here very quickly. So for example, if you're looking at the GPT-5 pricing, the pricing calculator doesn't have it yet. So I wanted to kind of build something that gave me access to model pricing straight away. The other thing that I really took inspiration from was the Azure Cost Management site. So I use this all the time to have a look at the pricing for, the meters that I'm actually using. And this works really well. And for the most part, you can actually use these filters here to filter on things that you want to see. So let's have a look at cognitive services. And then I can also then filter in here on something like GPT-5. So you can see these are the GPT-5 meters that I've been using. This is the cost. Now, and again, this is great, and I really like the sort of filters that we have here. The only problem with this, of course, is that you can only check the price for the models that you've actually used historically. This isn't giving you pricing for, per token pricing for models that you haven't used. This is all kind of historic. So I wanted to kind of combine the user friendliness of the pricing calculator, the simple user interface, the nice filtering capabilities that you have within cost management, but also wanted to be able to find models that I hadn't actually deployed yet. So I kind of wanted to combine all three of those things. And so I started building myself this over the course of a weekend. And honestly, it went from really nothing to a working prototype in a couple of hours. And the tools that I used to do that were primarily GitHub Copilot and Azure Static Web Apps. I'm going to sort of tell you about some of those in a minute. But before I do, I think it's important for me just to give you a little bit of background on the data source that I'm using for this website, which is the Azure Retail Prices API. Now, this is a public API which anyone can access. It's documented on this Microsoft Learn page here. So if you want to have a look and see for yourself, it's fine. The details on how to access it are in here. And so what I found myself doing when these new models were being released was, I was using REST API calls to be able to find out the information that I needed. Let's say GPT-5 just came out and I was using these endpoints to look up the GPT-5 pricing. Now, in this example I've got here, this is the API call that I would use, and because there's no front end, I would essentially get back a JSON response that looked something like this, which gave me all of the information I wanted, but actually would have been useful if I had a nice front end. So the reason for this Model Meters website was just really to put a nice user-friendly front end on the front of this. And so you can see here we've got the return on the meter name, the Azure data center location, the pricing for the meter, the unit of measure for the meter. And this API actually returns prices for every Azure meter that we have. Where is it? Oh, this one here. But I wanted just only filter for the AI model, so I've actually filtered using the cognitive services filter. Now then, if I go down a little bit here, it actually gives me a Python example. So here we go. So really, this was the kernel of the project. I kind of started with this Python sample here. I opened up VS Code, and I opened up, I pasted this sample in, and it's the exact same sample from the Microsoft Learn website. And in this case, it's just using the endpoint here, and it's going to query the API for standard NP20S virtual machine. And if I run this, let's see what it comes back with. Okay, cool. So it's giving me the response back. It's giving the SKU name, the retail price, the unit of measure, the region, the meter. And so, I was finding that I was modifying this to pull down the pricing that I wanted. But again, it wasn't very user friendly. It was still using the command line. I wanted something that I could just browse to on a website and use to sort of find this information myself. So I kind of decided that, well, why don't I just download all these price meters? So I adapted this script using GitHub Copilot. I asked it to essentially, take this as the basis of the script and rewrite me a downloader script, which allows me then to configure the input and the output for the meters that I want to download. And I've made this kind of built-in feature where I can just download the cognitive services meters. So if I run this now, you will see that it'll go off and it'll start downloading the cognitive services prices. And you can see here that it's downloading 10,000, 15,000. There's about 23,000 meters within this kind of cognitive services filter here. Nearly done. In fact, I'll delete that old one. Okay, so it's downloaded 23,712 prices. And we can see here that we've got all of these different ones in the list. And that was great. And I could export this to a spreadsheet, a CSV file, and I could use that and browse it. But I kind of wanted to kind of go a step further. So in this case, what I did was I used GitHub Copilot to essentially write me a nice front end for this. And, when I used this a few months ago, I used the agent mode to write me this. One thing that we've actually done in the last couple of weeks is we've released this new mode called plan mode. And so I thought I'd give you the opportunity just to see this in action as well, because I think some of you, this might be new for. We announced this at GitHub Universe last week, and it's available in the VS Code Insiders version at the moment if you want to try it out. So if I just close this off, and I'm going to ask it to write me a plan. So this plan is going to be, I'm just going to make sure I get the right file. Okay, so I'm going to ask it to create me a web front end to display the data in this file as a full screen table. To avoid the table being too large, just show these columns. I'm going to ask it to show 20 rows per page, give it a title, and put all the files in the root. So you just hit this plan button. You could just go off and do that agent mode straight away, but the nice thing about this new plan mode is it outlines for you what it's going to do. It gives you the opportunity to review the plan. Not only that, it also gives you some questions which might help you to give the agent a little bit more context when you are going to actually ask it to go ahead and start the building. So what it's doing now is the plan agent is looking at all of the files within my repo. There's not really very much in here at the moment. There's just a couple of Python files, a sample env file, gitignore file, and so it's just basically an empty folder. Right, so here's my plan. So it's going to create me an Azure pricing front end. It's going to build a static single page app that loads this file, parses the needed fields, and renders a paginated full screen table styled for a Azure Static Web Apps deployment. And these are the steps it's going to follow. Now, to me, this looks fairly reasonable, and it's giving me a few questions. So should the table include client-side filters? Confirm serving this directly from the root. So, I mean, I'm going to say pagination is fine. Don't need search. And we will say, yes, that's okay as well. So I'm essentially giving it a bit of feedback so that when we do start this deployment, then it will be working to this plan that we've got. And we also, if this kind of approach appeals to you, we've also got the sort of GitHub spec kit, which that's all around making sure that you have a really robust specification for the application you're building before you even start building that. So I think having these new tools available to plan your application are really valuable. Okay, great. So it's come back and it's giving me some more steps. It's asking me about any colors. At this stage, I'm just happy for it to start the implementation. And notice when I click on this start implementation button, the agent here will change from plan mode to agent mode, and it's going to essentially switch from planning to building. And I'm going to ask it just to go ahead and start the implementation. So let's have a look and see what it does. Again, using agent mode, it's going to look around the repository for all of the context that it needs from everything within here. It's going to use the plan that we have generated using the plan mode, and it's going to start building. You'll see in here there'll be some additional files that appear. So we've got an index.html. It's adding CSS as well, so we should see that CSS file appear very shortly. Yep, styles.css. And do we have anything else? I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A at the moment, not seeing any questions in there, but if you do have anything that you want to kind of ask while I'm going through this, there may be a couple of situations where I have to wait for the Copilot to build something. So here we go. It's just updating. Now you notice that because it's in agent mode, it's kind of doing this kind of iteration. It's kind of creating the initial file, and then it kind of goes back and updates based on the plan that it's working to. So you're thinking this agent is working essentially in a loop to make sure that what it's created is actually aligned to the plan that you've asked it to do. So it's created the front end, and if we want to preview it, I'm just going to use the live server extension to open this up. And hopefully do I have that installed? Open live server. Yep. Okay, great. So cool. So what was previously just a JSON file that I had sat on my machine, we've now got, it's a basic front end, but it's quite passable. There's kind of a first iteration. You could certainly build on this. And I'm broadly happy with that. There are a few things that we might improve later on, but all in all, this seems to be working. So what I'll do now is I'll flick back to VS Code. I'm going to say, yep, I'm happy with the files that you've created here. I'm going to keep those. And I think at the moment, I'm happy for that to be pushed to my GitHub repo as well. So this repo is essentially just a working branch of this GitHub repo that I've created in my account for the purpose of today's demo. So I'm just going to say created initial site, and that's going to commit and push the changes to my GitHub repo. So if I go in here, let's have a look. Not in this one. I've created a repo for today's session here, and we'll start to see, yep, literally just been added now. So we've got the index.html, and we've got the style sheet here that's been created. Again, it's relatively simple, it's relatively tight. And now once we've actually got this in the repo, we want to then publish that to an Azure static web web app. So we just switch to that. So we're on step 4 now. So how do we deploy this? Okay, so Azure Static Web Apps, if you've never used them before, it's a really simple way to publish web content that's static. So just like a simple, brochure site or a simple website that doesn't have content that's dynamic. So, it's not kind of like a dynamically generated. So if you've got something which is just basic HTML and CSS, then it's a really nice way of deploying it. There are some really nice features that I'll touch on in a minute, but let's get this deployed. So I'm going to go into Azure. I'm going to go into create a resource. We're going to go into web, and we're going to create a static web app. Okay, so I will create a new resource group. We'll call it Cloud Champion Test Web Resource Group. We'll give it a name, CC Test Web. You can create a free version. I'm going to, just for the purpose of today, I'm just going to create a standard deployment, and the source of the deployment is going to be GitHub. Now, I've already associated my GitHub account with this account in Azure, so I don't have to do that authentication, but it's a very simple process to authenticate. In here, I'm going to select the organization. I'm going to choose the repository which we're using, which is this Cloud Champion Model Meters, and we're just going to use the main branch. We're going to leave this as default, and this is the root of the folder, which is exactly where it is. So nothing else needs to change. So we are just going to click next, and then hopefully once it's validated, we'll be able to create. And so what are we doing here? So we're setting up a new static web app resource that's going to pull the content from the GitHub repository and publish it in an automated fashion. So what you'll see is once this is deployed, which should only take a few seconds, One of the things it will also do is there we go. So that's already deployed. And now if we actually click on this link now, there's probably not going to be anything here. Let's have a look. Yeah. Okay. So it's a blank website at the moment. You might be thinking, well, yeah, what about that, GitHub repo that you said we were going to push? Well, what it's done in the background is it has created a GitHub action, which is this Azure Static Web Apps workflow file, and it's going to automatically kick that off. And as part of the deployment process, it's going to build and deploy the files from this repo to the Azure Static Web App. And once that's finished, those files will be live on the website. So we'll just give this a few minutes to finish. And if you're interested, you can actually see, what it's doing here. We'll talk about GitHub Actions a bit later on in a minute. Now, the beauty of this is that when you deploy this action, this GitHub action, what it will do is whenever you push a new update to GitHub, it will automatically go and deploy your website through this. So that has finished, which is great. So now if we refresh this page, there we go. So I'm pretty sure that was, just a few minutes to go from having a generated HTML file that's on my machine. We pushed that to the GitHub repo. That GitHub repo then we were using CI/CD to deploy that to an Azure Static Web App, and now that Azure Static Web App is live on the internet at this location. So yeah, it's a really easy and simple process. Even if you're not, a confident front-end developer like myself, this is something which you could easily do if you wanted to stand up a basic page. And again, the beauty of this is using the workflow that gets published for you automatically. This workflow will trigger when you are pushing an update, a commit to the main branch, which means that when you decide to change something, this will automatically get pushed out to that website. So you don't have to keep deploying it manually. So really handy, really nice. A couple of things for me, this has given me a sort of generic Azure URL. I decided to splurge and spend $10 on a .com domain. And the way that you verify and associate that custom domain with your new website, there is a process essentially you just go through. It's a very simple, straightforward, 15-minute job to just go through and prove that you own the domain using DNS. And then you can essentially assign that custom domain to your Azure Static Web App. So one of the really neat feature I started to really appreciate when I was doing this was that you can actually have preview environments in Azure Static Web Apps as well. So as well as deploying your websites from the main branch to production, you can also do things like, for example, having a preview environment where you can use for testing or development, or if you're building a new feature, then you can try something out before you actually deploy it to the production slot. So a good example of this is I did this fun little add Halloween theme to my site, and again, this was literally just a few words just to sort of say, make me a Halloween theme. And the integration with Azure Static Web Apps meant that it created the pull request, and on that pull request, it also stood up this preview environment where it shows me what this is going to look like before I merge the code with the production slot. So, this is a really nice feature, and kind of you get this out of the box for very little configuration. So again, you can sort of see I've got the standard light mode, dark mode, and my Halloween theme that it's created me. And again, all of this is done separately from the production slot, so it's not interfering with the actual work. And in fact, there's even a bug here where you can see if I go into the light mode, there's still a little Halloween pumpkin here. So the nice thing about this is you could ask it to create your new feature, you can test it here, you can continue to provide that feedback to fix those problems before you then merge the code to make it live. So a really nice way to use these AI tools, but in a really safe way. Cool. But actually, when I was building this site, once I'd got the site live, I actually used the GitHub Copilot coding agent using my GitHub on my mobile. The reason for that was because it was over the weekend. I wasn't just sat in front of my computer all weekend. I was actually out in London for most of the weekend. So when I wanted to add a feature or make a change to the deployment, I would just get my phone, open up GitHub. I would open an issue, and then rather than me kind of writing in VS Code, I would simply just assign that issue to GitHub Copilot coding agent. Now, GitHub Copilot coding agent, it's available in the paid GitHub plans. So you may not necessarily have it if you have the sort of free GitHub, but I mean, this to me is completely changing the way that I think about software development and coding, because I now think of myself less as somebody who sits and writes code, but I feel like I'm more of a manager of an agent that writes code for me, and I delegate it tasks. To give you an example of what that looks like, let me open up this video. So this is an example of me creating an issue on GitHub, the GitHub app. So I'll go into the repo, go into issues. I create an issue. I'm just going to create a fake one here, but it could be something minor. It could be something like a large feature. I really found that using GitHub Copilot coding agent, it could really handle some really meaty requests. So I'm just entering. Again, this could be while you're on the move, out and about, and there we go. So rather than assigning this issue to me, I just assign it to GitHub Copilot coding agent, tick the box, and then GitHub Copilot goes off and essentially does the work in sort of an agentic way. And so this coding agent has the ability to again write a plan, execute the plan, check that the output conforms to the plan. Not only that, but it can also stand up a Playwright instance of the website, and just even browse around the site to make sure that what it's created is actually what was intended. Now, this does take a little while. It takes around about 10 minutes to do so, but you can kind of watch and see what it does while it's performing this task. You can kind of see what it's doing. But the way that I tend to work with this now is I tend to create the request. I basically ask it to do something for me, go off, have a cup of tea, have a coffee, have lunch, and then come back 15 minutes later. And it will essentially create me a pull request with the explanation of what it's done, how it's done that. And then I get the opportunity, once it's created that, let me just skip forward to the next video. So once it's actually finished, it will give me this pull request explaining what it's done, how it's done it, and even giving me the screenshots of what it looks like now. And again, all of those screenshots are done using Playwright, and Playwright is integrated actually using MCP. So I get the chance to review the code, approve, submit, and then all this can be done from my phone. I can actually merge the pull request, and because we have that CI/CD set up in the background, when the pull request is merged with main and we create that commit, it's going to initiate that CI/CD deployment and push to the website. So, and again, you could do this in a more complicated way and have, you know, staging and test branches if you wanted to kind of have those set up. But for me, this is a relatively simple project. I just wanted to kind of iterate really quickly. And yeah, this is the example that I did the other day. Actually, you know, a live situation. I showed this to somebody. They said, "Oh, you know what would be really great is if we had the option in this website to apply a percentage discount because they're an Azure customer and they've negotiated a discount." This is an enterprise customer, an EA, but it could also apply to a CSP partner where they've got a negotiated percentage discount with their indirect provider. And I said, "Oh yeah, let's do that." So essentially, I just simply described the feature, and this was actually done on my phone while I was waiting for my kids to get dressed for their, you know, trick or treat. And I assigned this job to Copilot. Copilot went off and did the work, came back, explained what it had done, shared the screenshots to give me confidence that it had done the work correctly, showed me where it placed the button, which was exactly where I'd asked it to. Not only that, it also created a Azure Static Web App that I could then click on and interactively check that, for example, when I apply a discount, it applies the correct discount. Yeah, and I managed to get that from the initial ask of that feature to deployed in the website live within an hour without even being in front of a computer. So now if I go to the website here, there's now this discount button here. And if I say, give me a 10% discount, it will also then show me on here. So, and I've done a little bit of, you know, finessing of the colors and, you know, I changed the icon here and, you know, I tweaked it a little bit, but the vast majority, you know, 99% of this functionality was all done using the GitHub Copilot coding agent. So it's a massive time saver for me. And it just means that I can get stuff out there faster than I would otherwise. And you know, it means that also it just lowers the barrier for new features that I want to kind of put in there. Whereas it might, you know, I might look at a feature previously and say, oh, that's going to take me a long time to implement this. Now I look at these features and say, you know what, let's just give that one to GitHub Copilot coding agent and let that take care of it. So the last couple more to do, and then we'll kind of cover off some of the useful bits of information for you. The other feature that I created as part of this site, as well as being able to show me the price meters, I also built an automatic AI summarization agent that is kind of linked to this. So what happens every month is this AI summary agent creates a summary of what's happened that month. So you can see these are the new meters within Azure AI Foundry for this month. And not only does it sort of summarize the description of the new meter and the pricing, it also links to the Microsoft Learn documentation as well. So this is handy if you've never come across a new model or feature before and you want to understand, oh, what's this Voice Live API and how does it work? Well, here's the link to the documentation that will explain what it's for and how it's priced. The initial implementation of this, I actually used just simply used the GitHub models and did a simple summarization. And then I wanted to then expand that really to also use this MCP integration for Microsoft Learn as well, so that I could include the documentation. So the way that I did this initially is I used some sample code that I'd written using the Azure OpenAI responses API, and so I can give you an idea of how I did this kind of summarization. And so this is the Python code, which essentially will allow you to call the Azure OpenAI model. In this case, I'm using GPT-5. And the responses API was just a simple way of doing it. I didn't really need it to be a very complicated agent, so I didn't really need a more advanced framework. If it was a little bit more advanced, or I needed some more advanced tooling, then I might have considered using the Azure AI Foundry agent service or the new Microsoft agent framework. But for this, all I wanted to do is just a simple summarization. So I took this code sample, I integrated it so that essentially I would take the latest month's worth of price files and then feed it into here and summarize that using a prompt which I'd crafted that gave me the response that I wanted. And then I decided, well, you know what, it would be great if I could also integrate the Microsoft Learn documentation. So I then switched to add a tool here. So again, this is a responses API call using Python. And instead of just asking for this prompt, we're also giving it access to this MCP tool here. Now, if you've never used MCP before, I would highly recommend having a read of the documentation about it, because it's a really scalable way for agents to be able to access tools. To give you a quick kind of overview around the architecture, I've included this link to the model context protocol site, the specification on here. Essentially, you've got this application, which is the MCP host. The host has a client, or it's a one-to-one relationship with the servers, and these servers are these could be API endpoints, they could be files on a server, they could be a database, but essentially it's abstracting away some of the integration that you would have had to have done sort of manually and for each LLM previously. And this kind of level of abstraction makes it really easy to kind of plug and play an MCP server, which provides these tools to an agent, which obviously is this within the MCP host here. So if you've never seen the Microsoft Learn MCP server, here it is. It is a fantastic remote MCP server which allows you to query the Microsoft Learn documentation from an AI agent. All you have to do is provide the agent with the MCP details, and essentially that's all the configuration that's required. And then you can then enhance that AI agent's capabilities through these tools here. And it looks like there's actually an extra tool that's been added recently. And this is the nice thing, the MCP server gets an upgrade, gets an extra tool. You don't have to actually make any change to your code in order to take advantage of that, because it's just being advertised by the MCP server. If you're new to MCP, there's a really nice way to try it out if you just want to simply install it in VS Code. VS Code has an incredibly good implementation of MCP. It really supports a lot of the specification of MCP, so you can do a one-click install if you just want to simply try it out in VS Code here. But for the purposes of this demo here, you can see this is what I ended up with in this Python file here. And this might look quite long and complicated, but essentially the core of this is quite simple. And in fact, I could actually just ask GitHub to say, summarize what this Python file does. Just focus on the important functional bits. But yeah, again, using GitHub to explain what it does. In this case, it's doing the API call using the Microsoft Learn documentation for the tool. It's using a prompt that specifies the pricing format and generates a markdown file, which then gets integrated into into this. Yeah, I actually loaded up the old version. So yeah, so this is just simply a series of markdown files here that get served. Okay, so final step here is really how do we bring this all together, automate all of this using GitHub Actions. So again, GitHub Actions, if you've never used them before, they're a really powerful way to automate a lot of the functionality that you want. And essentially, I used to be a little bit kind of scared of GitHub Actions. I thought it was this kind of really complicated thing, which was a little bit obscure and difficult. But essentially, what it boils down to is the GitHub Actions spins up a runner, or essentially like a Linux container, where you can execute your bash commands. And with that in mind, you essentially can perform almost anything, because if you can perform a bash command in a container, then you can execute a Python script, you can call an AI agent, you can really do anything you want, and it's event driven. So this event could be every time you're you merge a pull request. It could be every time something happens. It could be at 8 o'clock in the morning every day. It could be, you can kind of configure the event that triggers the action, and then within your action you have different steps which essentially execute the commands and scripts that you want it to do. To give you an idea of what one of these workflows looks like, I mean, I showed you earlier like the static web app workflow, which essentially this is the one that deploys my application automatically. So you can see here we've got the trigger, when does this run? We've got the permission section here, and then these are the jobs. This is what the actual script does. And again, the one that I'm using essentially every day is I'm pulling down the pricing file from the API. And let me use that same technique again. I'm going to, rather than sort of walk you through all the code here, I will just say summarize this action and pull out the key functional tasks. So let's have a look and see what this action is doing. So it's triggering, it's running every single day at midnight. I can also trigger it manually. It will essentially install the prerequisite Python dependencies, because we're using OpenAI here. It goes and downloads the pricing using the Python file that I showed you earlier. Then it also splits the file into monthly chunks, so that I can then do that. So I can have a look at the new files for any given month. It's using a summarization. So again, actually I didn't show this, but let me just go back to here. Yeah, so here's the script that I'm using here to do the responses API call. If I run this script here, and it's going to provide a one-sentence summary of Azure AI Search and provide a link to the Quick Start Guide. Let's have a look. Okay, so Azure AI Search is a cloud-based search. So this is the bit where it's essentially just giving me the overview, and it's also using the MCP server to return back the link to the Microsoft Learn documentation page. So going back to here, it's generating the AI summary. I also asked it to create me an RSS feed as well, which I didn't have time to do today, but I wanted to be able to essentially subscribe to any new information. It's updating a JSON file, which has an index to all of the different summaries. It's committing the changes. So, essentially this only commits any updates if there are any changes to any of these files. And then it deploys the website to Azure Static Web Apps if there's a new change. So, all of this is being done every single day automatically without me even having to worry about it or think about it. And I can see that, the last time this ran was at midnight, which is 1 o'clock UTC. And essentially that means that these are always up to date. And This is really now got to the point where I don't even have to think about it. It's a really simple site, which essentially I'm now able to kind of use as a tool. And I genuinely use the AI summaries and have a look at these every month just to make sure that I'm on top of what's changing. So it's nice to be able to kind of offload a task that I perhaps spent an hour or two every month on to this website now, where it's essentially just doing it in the background, completely automated for me. And yeah, I mentioned GitHub models earlier. If you want to experiment with using LLMs within your GitHub flow, it is actually possible to use GitHub models and integrate it into your actions. The benefits of using GitHub models over Azure OpenAI's endpoints are that you essentially can use the GitHub token, and your actions will use these services without you having to kind of authenticate. You essentially, because it's logging in with your account, it's essentially using your free GitHub models usage, which if you go beyond your free usage, you can also then connect to an Azure subscription to pay for. The reason why I'm actually using Azure AI Foundry rather than GitHub models is actually more of a technical reason, which was that the GitHub models doesn't currently support Responses API on Azure OpenAI. So for me to use that MCP integration, I actually switched over to an Azure AI Foundry models endpoint. And that also has the benefit of me that, I don't have to worry about the sort of the billing because it's all connected to my Azure account as well. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in kind of learning about what GitHub would call continuous AI, essentially using LLMs within your GitHub actions, there's this fantastic GitHub skills course where you can go through the process of integrating AI into your GitHub actions. This does require a sort of foundational knowledge of GitHub actions, but it's a very simple, straightforward exercise that probably takes 15-20 minutes and really helps you understand how you can integrate AI into your GitHub actions. I also would generally recommend, if you've not already done this, the learning content associated with the GitHub Foundations certification is excellent. So if it's very hands-on, it's all based on GitHub repos that you essentially clone and then work on, and it's using GitHub Actions to kind of keep it up to date. So yeah, even if you don't want to take the GAH 900 exam, this GitHub Foundations exam, just doing the 5 or 10 hours of training would really, I think, help a lot of people to kind of understand some of the basic concepts of GitHub, GitHub Copilot, and some of the things like GitHub Actions as well, which again, I'd not really used GitHub Actions much before this, but because of this training, I'm increasingly using this, so definitely recommended. Anything else left to cover in here? No. Okay, good. So that's the end of this kind of section in terms of how I use GitHub and GitHub services to create this site and publish it to Azure Static Web Apps, and using Azure AI Foundry to do this kind of automated agentic summarization. I hope you found that useful. I'd love to hear any feedback that you might have, or any questions. I think the Q&A's I've got a couple of questions in here. And before I wrap up, I just wanted to share some useful resources with you. If you are a Microsoft partner and you want to get access to Azure Credit, I put together this kind of summary of options for you. This also includes things like being able to access the free GitHub models. It also provides you with the links to all of these different options. So depending on what stage of partnership you are with Microsoft, you might have access to the partner launch benefits, solution partner designation, or even the specialized $12,000 a year Azure credit. If you are unsure on any of these, feel free to reach out to your partner development manager, your PTS, or your distributor, who can help you with getting access to these. If you don't have access to any of them, have a look at this column here, the partner launch benefits, partner success benefits, because these options are available, regardless of any revenue or skilling requirements. So you can actually just simply go here and purchase these in a similar way that you used to be able to do with the Microsoft Action Pack. If you would like to do more around Azure AI Foundry in particular and build solutions using Azure AI Foundry, we have a we have a Discord channel, which we have around, it's nearly 40,000 members now, who are all building using Azure AI Foundry models, and it's a great place to hang out and sort of ask questions. We've got a lot of the team who are sort of on that site to be able to answer questions. People like myself are on there as well, advising developers and partners on how to use Azure AI Foundry services. And yeah, it's just a really great kind of community hangout with developers helping each other. We also, from a UK and Ireland perspective, we have a partner technical community, again, for partners, but this covers the whole of Azure. So whether it's Azure Infra, Azure Data, or AI services, you can essentially join. And we've recently expanded this from, it used to be just UK, but we've also expanded this now to UK and Ireland as well. So if you would like to join that, you are very welcome. The Cloud Champion series continues next week with a couple of sessions from my good colleagues. So we've got Darren and Annie, who are going to do a follow-up to their marketplace session from last week. This session was originally going to be this week, so you can see it was originally going to be yesterday, but we've had to push it back to next week. So now, in fact, both of these sessions are going to be on the 12th of November. So you have a very exciting double bill coming up next week for the marketplace follow-up session, and also the session from Robin, who's going to be talking about data and the foundation for the AI services that we're building. As always, if you want to be able to access any of the sessions from this series, I think we did like 5 sessions in October, which are all available on demand now. And we've got 10 sessions that are coming up between now and the end of the year. With that, I'll just say thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions that I'll answer in a second, but if you want to have a look at the repo that I've published this content to, you can just have a look at it here. The recording and the presentation will be available at the original link that you signed up to this in a few days, so just bear with us while we get these uploaded, but essentially they will appear in here a few days later. With that, Marina, I'm just going to ask if you could stop the recording, and I'll kind of answer a couple of these questions that have appeared in the chat. Okay, great. So we got a question from Andrea. Is it possible to use Azure repos instead of GitHub? Not sure, actually. I'll have a look. So we did this. I did this all on GitHub. So let's have a look and see what options we've got in there. So if I go web, static web app, let's see what we could use here. Azure DevOps. So it looks like that might be an option for you. Certainly, one thing that you could do is just have a look at so where is it? In the slides for this session, there's a link to here, and that documentation should tell you what options you've got. It even mentions happy to follow up with you afterwards, Andrew, if you want to. We can check on that for you. And then another question from Ian. Can you go back to the plan and have it rebuild, update later based on new or additional features or changes? That's a really interesting one, Ian. So I think you're asking about the plan in agent mode. If I go back to here, essentially the plan that is created in agent in plan mode, if I go into here and scroll up a little bit, this plan, this doesn't get saved as an asset within your project. So the plan essentially will disappear once I click on this. If you wanted to do something like that, if you wanted to actually save the plan, you could have a look at the GitHub spec kit, which is kind of a way to do specification-driven development. And with this, you are essentially, you create this specification as an asset, and then that is essentially the plan that you're using to then build the project. And in that sense, that's perhaps more like what you're talking about in terms of having a plan which evolves over time, rather than having just simply a plan that exists for the purpose of spinning up the initial agent piece. So it's a really good question. Yeah, worth checking out spec kit. All right, I think that's all. We've only got those two questions. So with that, I'm going to say again, thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate everyone who's joined the call. Thanks for everyone who's stuck around to the end as well. Again, we'll continue the Cloud Champion session next week, and I also have a new session coming up in December. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Please feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn, and look forward to seeing you again next